The crowd in Ouagadougou was buzzing that morning, the air heavy with anticipation as soldiers in crisp uniforms lined the presidential compound. President Ibrahim Traoré had called for a major address to his people, promising to speak directly about matters that had shaken the nation. To outsiders, it looked like a normal day of heightened security and protocol. But within the ranks of those guards who stood tall, rifles polished and boots gleaming, a secret threat lurked that not even the most loyal soldier had detected. Unbeknownst to many, a spy had infiltrated the heart of Traoré's security. He was not dressed in a black cloak, nor creeping in shadows like in the movies. Instead, he blended perfectly with the disciplined men who pledged loyalty to their leader. He marched in rhythm, saluted with precision, and even exchanged jokes in the barracks. He was, in every visible sense, one of them. But beneath his carefully rehearsed exterior, his allegiance lay elsewhere. For weeks, whispers had been swirling in intelligence circles. Rumors of foreign agents working to destabilize Burkina Faso, plotting from afar but using insiders to do their dirty work. Traoré had risen as a leader who refused to bow to outside powers, who openly criticized the exploitation of Africa's resources, and who declared that Burkina Faso would walk its own path, free from the grip of old empires. This defiance made him a target. And what better way to strike than from within? But here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Most leaders, overwhelmed by paranoia, might have hidden behind layers of protection or distanced themselves from their own men. Traoré, however, understood something profound. A leader's greatest weapon is not fear, but trust sharpened by wisdom. He had grown up among ordinary citizens, fought shoulder to shoulder with soldiers, and knew the rhythm of sincerity in a man's voice. And so, when this spy thought he had mastered the art of disguise, he underestimated the sharp instincts of a leader born from the struggle of his people. It all began with something small, almost unnoticeable. During a routine drill, the guards moved in unison, their boots striking the ground with that familiar thunder. But Traoré, watching with the trained eyes of a soldier who had spent years in the field, noticed one man's movements just a fraction offbeat. Not sloppy, not careless, almost too perfect, as if performed by someone desperate not to make a mistake. It was the kind of precision that doesn't come from natural discipline but from rehearsed imitation. Later, when they shared a simple meal, the same soldier hesitated for a split second when asked a question in the local dialect. He recovered quickly, laughing and nodding, but that tiny pause told Traoré everything. He had always believed that loyalty is not proven by uniform or salute, but by the heartbeat of shared struggle. And this man, though camouflaged in the brotherhood of the guards, carried a heartbeat out of sync with the rest. From then on, Traoré sharpened his watch. He didn't confront the soldier immediately. Instead, he let the performance continue, all the while piecing together subtle clues. A misplaced phrase here, a slip in regional knowledge there, a strange eagerness to stand close during sensitive briefings. It became clear. The spy was not just watching. He was gathering information, perhaps waiting for the right moment to act. But how do you expose such a man without sowing fear among your own loyal guards? That was the dilemma. Traoré knew that to accuse without proof would fracture trust, the very foundation he had worked to build. And so, he crafted a test, one that would draw out the truth without alarming those who stood faithfully by his side. The day of the address arrived. Citizens gathered in the square, waving flags, chanting, their voices carrying the hope of a nation determined to rise against centuries of exploitation. Traoré stood before them, his words fiery, his tone resolute, promising to defend their sovereignty no matter the cost. The guards, including the hidden spy, stood firm around him, eyes scanning the crowd, hands on weapons, prepared for any sign of unrest. Then, just as the speech reached its most powerful crescendo, Traoré did something unexpected. He turned sharply to his men, giving an order that seemed routine on the surface but was, in reality, a trap designed to expose the infiltrator. He commanded them to execute a drill known only to those who had been through certain operations in the rural regions of Burkina Faso, an exercise rooted in the culture and history of local resistance movements, one that outsiders would never truly understand or replicate. As the men shifted into formation, each step, each gesture aligned perfectly, the rhythm of years of shared hardship guiding them. But the spy faltered, just slightly but enough. His stance broke, his movement lagged, his expression tightened in that fleeting instant of panic. To the untrained eye, it might have looked like nothing more than human error. But to those who knew the bond of authentic brotherhood, it was the crack that revealed the mask. The soldiers didn't move against him immediately. Discipline held them steady, their loyalty tied to the trust in their leader. But Traore's sharp gaze locked on the man, and in that silent moment, the truth passed between them. The spy knew he had been discovered, and Traore, calm but unyielding, stepped forward, his voice cutting through the air not with rage, but with the authority of a man who sees beyond deception. "Among us," he said, his voice firm yet measured, "there is one who does not march to the rhythm of our people, one whose heart beats for a master far from these lands. Today you are unmasked, not by my suspicion, but by the truth that always reveals itself." Gasps rippled through the crowd, the guards stiffened, and the spy's mask crumbled as he realized the walls had closed in. He had walked boldly into the lion's den, but the lion was not blind. And here lies the brilliance of the moment. Traore did not strike with immediate punishment, nor did he allow chaos to erupt. Instead, he turned the revelation into a lesson for his people. He reminded them that betrayal can wear the face of loyalty, that foreign powers might send agents dressed as brothers, but no disguise can survive the scrutiny of truth. The crowd roared in support, their chants rising louder, as the spy was taken away under guard. For the people, it was a moment that crystallized their faith in a leader who was not only brave but perceptive, a man who could see through the layers of deception designed to destabilize their struggle. And for Traore, it was more than just catching a spy. It was proof that trust, sharpened by vigilance, is the most unshakable shield a leader can wield. In that moment, a potential threat turned into a story of strength, a reminder to every Burkinabe that their fight for sovereignty was not just against visible enemies, but against hidden ones as well. And with their leader's wisdom, they would prevail. The spy's capture sent ripples far beyond the compound walls. News spread quickly, carried on whispers in the marketplace, echoed in conversations across villages, and reported in headlines by international media. But the way it was told depended on who was speaking. Inside Burkina Faso, the people spoke of their president's sharp instincts, almost calling it a sixth sense, an unshakable bond between leader and nation. Outside, however, in the corridors of foreign influence, there was embarrassment, even anger. For the spy had not simply failed in his mission. He had been publicly exposed, turned into a symbol of outside meddling. In truth, this was not the first attempt. Ever since Traore rose to prominence, rejecting deals that handed African wealth to foreign companies, he became a thorn in the side of powerful interests. Where others before him had accepted the status quo, he demanded change. Where leaders once traveled abroad for approval, he stayed close to his soil, shoulder to shoulder with farmers, soldiers, and youth. And that independence was dangerous to those who thrived on African dependency. The spy incident, though shocking, was also revealing. It showed just how far external actors were willing to go to weaken him. They could not silence his speeches that resonated across the continent, so they sought instead to plant doubt among his inner circle. But ironically, their attempt backfired. By trying to shake trust, they ended up strengthening it. On the night of the exposure, Traore met privately with his loyal guards. There was no lecture, no harsh words. Instead, he sat with them around a simple wooden table, bread and tea shared as equals. He reminded them that betrayal is not always the failure of vigilance, but the cost of courage. "The more we walk our own path," he said softly, "the more they will send shadows among us. But shadows cannot survive in the light of unity." Those words were carried in the hearts of his men like armor. They were not just defending a leader. They were defending the dream of a nation that wanted to stand on its own. And in that dream, every farmer tilling the soil, every student raising their voice, every mother hoping for her child's future, became a soldier in spirit. But here's where the story deepens. The captured spy, once in custody, revealed more than expected. Under questioning, he admitted to being funded by networks tied to foreign intelligence. His task had been simple in instruction but devastating in intention. Gather details about the president's routines, his closest allies, and moments of vulnerability. One report, one small leak of information, could have opened the door for an attack or created chaos. The plan was not just to remove a leader, but to fracture the very confidence of a people newly awakened to their strength. Yet, as the revelations came to light, so too did the resilience of the Burkinabe spirit. Instead of fear, the people responded with resolve. Crowds marched in the streets, not in panic but in solidarity, chanting the name of their leader and waving their national flag with pride. They understood the message clearly. If outside powers had to send spies disguised as brothers, then their movement was working. Their independence was no longer just an idea, it had become a reality that threatened the status quo. Contrast this with the reaction in foreign capitals. Analysts debated heatedly on news channels, some ridiculing the paranoia of African leaders, others nervously acknowledging that Traoré's popularity was only growing. The image of a young leader exposing a foreign-backed spy was impossible to spin without admitting interference. It was not just a local scandal, it was a global embarrassment, and the very attempt to weaken him had, ironically, made him stronger. Still, Traoré understood the dangers of overconfidence. He knew that every victory carried the temptation of complacency, and complacency could be fatal. So he doubled down, not with grand displays of power, but with humility and vigilance. He strengthened ties with loyal commanders, increased intelligence cooperation with trusted allies, and most importantly, reinforced the bond between himself and his people. For he believed that as long as the people remained awake and united, no foreign plot could truly succeed. In villages across Burkina Faso, the story of the spy was retold like a parable. Elders reminded the youth that betrayal often comes dressed as friendship, and vigilance must never sleep. Teachers spoke of it in classrooms, not as a tale of fear, but as a lesson in discernment and pride. Even farmers, bending over their fields, whispered about how the president had seen through deception with nothing but instinct and trust. In their eyes, he was not just a politician, he was a guardian of the nation's soul. And while the people celebrated, Traoré himself stayed grounded. He never allowed the moment to inflate his ego. Instead, he framed it as a warning. If one spy had been caught, others might still be lurking. He urged his men not to look over their shoulders in suspicion of each other, but to keep their eyes focused forward, on the greater mission of building a sovereign future. Trust, once broken, is hard to repair, but trust nurtured carefully becomes unbreakable. There is a striking contrast here, one that resonated with people worldwide. In many countries, leaders become distant, hidden behind walls of security, disconnected from those they lead. But Traoré, even after an attempt from within, chose not to retreat into isolation. He continued walking among his people, visiting markets, speaking directly to students, greeting farmers in their fields. To him, leadership was not about building taller walls but about walking bravely in the open, knowing that his strength lay in the love and loyalty of his people. This choice shocked observers abroad. Surely, they thought, after such a close call, he would shield himself. But that was precisely the point. Traoré knew that the more he withdrew, the more fear would creep in, and fear was the enemy of freedom. By remaining accessible, by showing courage where others would show caution, he sent a message louder than any speech. Burkina Faso would not be ruled by fear, neither from spies nor from the powers that sent them. And so, the story that began with a hidden enemy turned into a symbol of open strength. It wasn't just about catching one infiltrator. It was about proving that truth, unity, and courage are weapons far stronger than deception. The spy thought he was playing a clever game of masks, but he walked into a leader who didn't just look at uniforms and words. He listened to the heartbeat of loyalty. The world began to notice. Across Africa, young people shared the story on social media, adding their own commentary. Memes and slogans turned the exposure into a rallying cry. No disguise can fool the people's eyes. Videos of the moment spread widely, inspiring not just Burkinabe citizens but others across the continent who longed for leaders who could stand firm against external pressure. It became more than an event, it became a movement, a symbol of what it meant to defend dignity in an age of deception. But what happened next would prove even more shocking. For while the captured spy thought his mission had failed, his very presence had revealed a network more extensive than anyone imagined. And by unmasking one, Traore had inadvertently pulled a thread that would unravel a web of secrets stretching far beyond Burkina Faso's borders. The story was not over, it was only just beginning. The spy's capture should have been the end of the story. Yet in truth, it was the beginning of something larger, something far more dangerous. For as investigators pored over his notes, his coded messages, and the devices he carried, they discovered links that stretched well beyond the compound. Hidden in plain sight were references to contacts in neighboring countries, encrypted instructions from handlers thousands of miles away, and evidence of payments routed through shadowy organizations. This was not the work of a single agent acting alone. It was a network woven carefully over months, perhaps years, designed to infiltrate not only Traore's circle but other African movements rising in defiance of foreign influence. And here was the twist. By exposing this one spy, Traore had pulled at a loose thread that now threatened to unravel the entire design. In moments like these, most leaders would have reacted with anger or paranoia. They would have tightened their grip, silenced dissent, and retreated into a cocoon of suspicion. But Traore chose another path. Instead of fueling fear, he turned the exposure into education. In speeches delivered across Burkina Faso, he warned his people that deception often comes dressed as loyalty, but vigilance and unity were stronger than any plot. He made the story of the spy a national lesson. The enemy can wear our uniform, but he cannot wear our soul. The impact was immediate. Rather than sinking into distrust, the people became more aware, more alert, more determined to protect what they were building. Farmers in the countryside began organizing their own watch groups, not as militias, but as guardians of community trust. Students in universities held forums discussing the meaning of sovereignty and the risks of manipulation. And soldiers, once shaken by the thought of a spy in their ranks, stood taller, prouder, convinced that their unity was their shield. But the story did not stop at Burkina Faso's borders. Across Africa, in cities from Dakar to Nairobi, people shared the tale as proof that the era of blind submission was ending. Leaders once dismissed as powerless were now seen as capable of exposing global players at their own game. Traore's sharp instincts became a metaphor for a continent's awakening, a reminder that Africa was no longer a chessboard but a player, capable of flipping the board when necessary. And here lies the ultimate irony. The foreign networks that planted spies intended to weaken him, to sow division, to paint him as paranoid. Instead, they achieved the opposite. Their plan created a symbol of strength, a leader who not only spotted deception but used it to unite his people. They underestimated the power of authenticity, the bond between a leader and a population tired of being underestimated themselves. The moment that had begun as a silent infiltration ended as a thunderous declaration. Africa was watching, Africa was learning, and Africa was no longer afraid. Of course, the networks behind the spy did not disappear overnight. They regrouped, recalculated, and searched for new ways to exert influence. But Traore had already won a deeper battle, the battle for perception. His people now saw through the mask. They understood that every attempt to destabilize their progress was proof that their progress mattered. That realization turned vulnerability into strength. The story of the spy became folklore, told around fires at night and whispered in crowded streets. Children reenacted it in games, pretending to be guards who spotted the imposter. Poets turned it into verse, singers into songs. It became a part of the nation's living memory, a reminder that freedom is never given but defended, not just with weapons, but with wisdom and vigilance. And as for the world, the image of Traore exposing the spy traveled far, carried by journalists, amplified on social media, dissected in think tanks. Some saw it as defiance. Others saw it as leadership, but all saw it as unforgettable. The spy thought he could blend in, thought he could hide among loyalty. But loyalty, when real, has a language that deception can never speak. And that was his downfall. In the end, what shocked the world was not the spy himself, but the response. A young leader choosing calm over chaos, unity over suspicion, courage over fear. A people who refused to be shaken, who turned betrayal into strength. And a continent reminded that even in the face of infiltration, dignity cannot be disguised. So when the story is told today, it is not just about how a spy was caught. It is about how a nation proved that no matter how clever the disguise, truth has a way of revealing itself. And in that revelation lies the greatest strength of all. A bond between leader and people that no enemy, no matter how hidden, can ever break. Because sometimes, the most shocking part of the story is not how the spy was exposed, but how his failure exposed something much greater: the unshakable power of unity.